Hello?
Okay. Good evening. We'll call the regular meeting of council to order for Monday, September 2nd, 2014. I'll ask council to consider the recommendation concerning the adoption of the agenda. The recommendation is that the agenda for the regular council meeting of September 2nd, 2014 be adopted as circulated. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Any discussion? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. The agenda is adopted. Next for council's consideration are the minutes to be adopted. The first minutes are from the special council meeting of August 18th, 2014. The recommendation is to adopt. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next is the minutes for consideration of the regular council meeting of August 18th, 2014. The recommendation is to adopt. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Garon. Are there any errors or omissions? Question has been called. Those in favor? Thank you. Those minutes are adopted. Next, under petitions and delegations, we have a presentation. This is from the Ministry of Forests, Lands and Natural Resources Operation regarding angling management in the Skeena region. I'd ask the representative to come forward, please. Good evening. I understand that you're pinch hitting on short notice because your superior isn't here. Thank you for being here this evening. Please proceed when you're ready. You could certainly introduce yourselves to the council, and you're on TV, so we'll ask you to use that microphone right there. And you press the grayish green button, you'll be on, and you'll also be on television locally.
So
please pull the microphone closer to you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. My name is Dana Taggy. I'm the Fish and Wildlife Manager for Skeena Region with the Ministry of Forest, Lands and Natural Resource Operations based in Smithers. I am here on relatively short notice. Tony Pesklevitz, our Director of Resource Management, was originally invited to come talk and he was scheduled to, but some pressing matters came up and he asked me to come this week. So, and I brought with me Mark Beer. He's the Senior Fisheries Biologist for Fish and Wildlife in the Skeena region as well with me in Smithers.
Thank you. We have a particular fondness for fisheries biologists here. Are you with us this evening, Councillor Thorkelson?
Yes, poor Dana.
Hi, Joy. So I put some notes together here that I'll speak to for council.
Certainly.
And
thank you.
And it speaks to three issues I think that one around steelhead management generally, and one around trout and char management as it speaks to angling regulations, and then finally a piece on angling advisory processes and how we engage with our stakeholders and things like that. So mindful of time and everything. So just generally speaking, thank you, Council, for giving us the opportunity to speak. On the steelhead management side, it's hard to really go too far down the road without talking a little bit about biology, which will be very brief. Steelhead generally are a seagoing trout. They have different run timings. Summer runs come in during the summer enter freshwater during this time period, and winter runs on the coast will enter freshwater to spawn, as we say in the winter, so November, December, January, those kind of timings. The Skeena and Nass River support both both forms of steelhead, winter and summer runs, and they migrate far into the interior, up past Smithers and up past Bell Irving and far places in the Nass watershed for summer run steelhead. And they're relatively unproductive, and by that I mean that their abundance is lower than we would see for most salmon species. They're just not as numerous. Still have been historically harvested by sports fishermen long in the past when we had um, 40 years ago when sport fishing was kind of developing in the province. First Nations harvest them for food, social, ceremonial purposes, and they migrate with steelhead. Summer and steelhead migrate with salmon and are incidentally captured as bycatch in commercial fisheries. The current situation that anglers are managed as non-retention province-wide. So, as a sports fisherman, you can't keep a steelhead. They're released in all fisheries, and it's a province-wide regulation. And along with our DFO fishery manager counterparts and others, many others will say that the province has collaborated to reduce bycatch in commercial fisheries over the past 20 plus years that I've been in the Skeena region. We've worked with the agencies to try to achieve that, to minimize them. And the sports fishery is highly regulated. That's one of the key pieces. And the steelhead sports fishery yields many economic benefits upriver and social benefits as they contribute to communities in Houston and Smithers and Terrace and the Hazeltons contribute to that sport fishery. One of the most recent policy changes that has come forward is the provincial framework for steelhead management in BC. It's a policy document that gives direction, that establishes provincial management goals and objectives for steelhead across BC. It's not very prescriptive. It gives broad strategies to meet these objectives, and it's currently out for consultation with our stakeholders province-wide. It really is to give advice to regional fisheries managers on how we might manage those fisheries. So it's not prescriptive or comprehensive in that sense. So that's generally an overall steelhead picture. I don't know how you want to, when questions arise, if we want to take them or go forward, or I might just go on to the part two of my oral presentation.
Are there any questions regarding the first part of the presentation? Please proceed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So in trout and char regulations have come up as an issue. We've changed some regulations recently. In April of 2013, we instituted new angling regulations for stream, so river and stream trout and char in Skeena region. And in that suite of regulation changes that came forward were that all Dolly Varden and bull trout, so their char, freshwater char, moved to non-retention except on the waters of Haida Gwaii in our Skeena region. And trout, so rainbow trout and cutthroat trout, have gone to daily quotas of one per day, reduced to one per day for the period July 1 to October 31. And then after October 31, so November 1st to June 30th, they have gone to non-retention. And that covers off their spawning period and things like that to allow them to go breed without worry. Um, and additionally, that's allowed for some limited retention opportunity in some of our busier watersheds, especially during the summer sport fishery when there's salmon and things in the water as well. The rationale for that decision, stream trout and char, dolly varden, and bull trout have declined across their range throughout British Columbia and North America wide. Fish and Wildlife Branch received numerous regulations proposals calling for more restrictive regulations. Anglers had noticed reduction in catches and reduction in the body size of these fish. And those two particular facts are classical indicators of what we would call in the fishery science side recruitment overfishing. So we're just overfishing them. And they tend to be very unproductive species as well because they're long lived and they don't reproduce till they're old. And so we've taken a precautionary approach to these stream resident trout and char. They don't go to the ocean. They spend their entire life period in life cycle in fresh water in these rivers. And we take it at a quite a large scale. At the Skeena region is where these regulations apply, and that has been quite a controversial regulation that we put in place. Interestingly enough, most of British Columbia is non-retention for stream char, with only a few exceptions where they're allowed to be harvested because they're vulnerable to fishing. And in the ministry we understand that this is would been an impact to anglers, and we've heard the concerns from anglers for the past year and a half over that. And to that effect, the concerns are it's too restrictive. And from the onset, we plan to evaluate and look for areas and waters where retention opportunities could be reinstated. And we've dedicated some funding in this coming year to undertake that analysis to look for some of those opportunities where we can ease up on those regulations and provide some opportunity for sports fishers. Um, yeah, that kind of concludes
So that may come out in the spring synopsis, would it?
no, the work that, so the funding that will come forward will be April of 2015.
So
We'll have one more,
2016 you're
yeah,
talking about,
yeah, that the earliest that we would be implementing.
right? Okay, let's see if there's any questions from members of council. Councillor Ashley.
Just one question. I mean, I'm just wondering, do you have any idea right now how many anglers are catching char and some of these other, like, kind of, I guess, vulnerable species?
We have surveys. Oh, sorry. So we have surveys that of anglers that we survey them to see what they've caught, and but it's pretty broad based. It wouldn't be specific to anglers in the Skeena. It would be province wide that we would do surveys. And sometimes they would be specifically for steelhead fishermen, and so they're not really targeted at trout anglers per se. So no, I guess the answer is no.
Councillor Cunningham.
You said you use province-wide statistics, not Skeena watershed specific statistics for your decisions?
No, that was a context piece.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, pardon me. That would be a context piece about province wide. We've had implemented similar regulations in place that have been many years, some 10 or 15 or 20 years far advanced of us, because down south where the populations are bigger, they've had impacts much sooner than we have.
I have a question.
Please go ahead.
I understand, you said that the province is consulting on its steelhead policy or steelhead plan. Could you elaborate on that? And obviously, we've had a fair number of disputes from the commercial fishery with the ministry over steelhead management. And so how does the commercial fishery get input into the provincial government's decision on steelhead management?
Just recognizing that this is just a policy advice kind of document. It's not fishery regulations or anything like that. But the process would be that the steelhead framework document is being developed by our headquarters staff in Victoria. So it's a provincial document, applied provincially, developed provincially. So the best way to do that would be to provide comment. It's currently on our angling, hunting, and trapping education website. I'm not quite sure when that public consultation period closes. It's been sent out to our provincial angling advisory team, so a number of stakeholders have seen it. I don't know if it's not my file per se, so I'm not sure. And sounds like the commercial sector has not been consulted on it directly, but a simple query to our headquarters staff in Victoria, and it would be made. It's available online for open consultation, and the timing for its finalization is still 6 or 8 months away. So it's not a finalized document by any stretch.
So you're hoping to get a wide range of participants looking at it and providing comment.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Cunningham.
Who enforces the regulations? Do DFO or the Ministry of Environment?
So the regulations are all angling regulations in freshwater can be enforced by either of those two enforcement agencies. The conservation officers are the enforcement wing, what we would consider to be, and you would consider to be game wardens, are the enforcement officers from the Ministry of Environment. The DFO fishery officers have the same, they have the same powers to enforce freshwater regulations. Although the primary folks who would be enforcing that would be the Ministry of Environment conservation officers.
Your Worship, I have another question.
Please go ahead.
I was wondering if either of you can answer the question regarding it was the long-term and short-term objectives that the Ministry of Environment had regarding steelhead and the Skeena River, and it was to make sure that the social, economic, and ecological benefits that a robust Skeena River steelhead population provides to the inland communities was balanced with the to ensure that the commercial sockeye fishery was economically viable. And I was wondering who do we talk to about ensuring that our commercial fishery is economically viable in the provincial government, because it seems that the pressure is it certainly is from the Steelhead Guiding Association and from Skeena Wild, who are saying that they want our exploitation rate on the coast decreased on steelhead. Since we only caught 18% of the sockeye run this year, it's very difficult to see how far lower our fishery could go. It's certainly not viable right now at 18%. We need to increase our harvest rate. So how do we balance the need, and who do we talk to about balancing the need for a robust commercial fishery along with a robust commercial fishery inland for the steelhead people? I mean, there surely must be room for a robust sockeye fishery on the coast and a robust steelhead industry inland. How do we balance that?
That's an excellent point you make. I believe that the the true answer is in that, well, there's two parts in the from the policy world in our draft policy. One of the things that comes from our in the policy document is that it recognizes the interests of the commercial fishing industry, and that the province we have and the various agencies within the province recognizes that there are um, commercial objectives to be achieved, and there is a balance to be found of what that balance is of getting fish upriver and still providing opportunity for commercial fishing on the coast. Um, and there's a couple of levels. Either one can be done regionally, so at the Prince Rupert to the Smithers office at that level, and then there's the the Victoria headquarters folks, which would be equivalent to the Ottawa folks at DFO that you could have a conversation with as well. And it really is about the selective opportunities that will be available in the commercial fishery and those kinds of things that will help ameliorate and achieve that balance, I think. It's a combination
Right.
of both. I don't know how we get there really, Joy, but we are not so naive to believe that there aren't um, equitable interests on both sides of the ledger.
Right, because it's concerning. Prince Rupert is really the focus for the commercial fishery, and certainly the focus for the commercial gillnet fishers.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still several hundred gillnet fishers who live on the north coast, and the short-term objective was to uh, ensure that only selective gear types, and you deemed gillnetters as not being selective. So you're saying that the policy is um, that non-selective gears be moved off the Skeena, and that does not seem to be a balancing of interests. And I'm wondering where in the provincial government does who in the provincial government, if it's not the Ministry of Environment, which it wasn't before, and I see that you now work for the Ministry of Forest and Natural Resources, is there a balancing act within the Ministry of Natural Resources? Is there somebody in the province who is going to say that the commercial fishing industry also has a right to exist, and there should be a balance on the Skeena, because we have seen, with regards to steelhead, no balance in the ministry's in the old Ministry of Environment anyway, statements of policy.
If I could, Joy, it's Mark here. I don't think that steelhead have factored into the impacts to the commercial fishery of late. For example, in this particular year, this season, you speak of an 18% harvest rate. It really doesn't, steelhead really don't come into play. I believe from DFO reports that weak stocks of wild sockeye and chum, etc., have been factors in the harvest rate, but certainly not steelhead. And even though the province has fairly clear ideas for minimizing bycatch for another suite of economic and cultural and other reasons, I don't believe it's steelhead managers have had a play in commercial activity of late.
No, I think that's right. This year, last year we didn't have a fishery, but I think in 2006, which isn't so long ago, this year hadn't had it. There was a problem. In 2010, there could have been a problem. So I'm not
No,
asking about whether there is or is not a problem. That every season will bring its own issues. What I'm asking for is where, if it's not at your level, where is the balancing to occur?
and just for council's perhaps broader benefit, that um, the province doesn't open and close these commercial fisheries. We provide advice and uh, um, um, perhaps some objectives to the Department of Fisheries, who manages the commercial fisheries, and the ultimate decision maker of whether or not a fishery opens or closes, and what the balance is, and what's being considered is in many cases we're just another stakeholder in lots of those decisions.
Anything
Thank you
further?
very much for coming. I was looking for a champion for the commercial industry, because it seems like within the province, I don't expect to find a champion for the commercial sector within the DFO, but I was hoping to find a champion for the commercial sector somewhere in the province.
Well,
And it seems that the steelheaders have had their champions, and I was just looking to know if in the policy document there's any room for a champion to develop in the provincial ministries for this beleaguered salmon industry.
Councillor Thorkelson, we have had some cursory discussions with the Minister of Fish and Food at one point about, well, the provincial government has no desire to become the administrators of the West Coast salmon fishing industry. We did have a conversation about how the province could pay closer attention, and the province, of course, has a stronger rapport with the federal government as opposed to us at the community level. And really what happens to the West Coast salmon fishing industry, while it's done through federal initiatives, actually has the greatest effect on provincial residents. The minister understood what I was saying to him. However, there was no commitment beyond the noted interest. But it may be something that this council wishes to pursue at the upcoming Union of BC Municipalities Conference. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming here this evening.
okay.
Your information is good, and hopefully people will look at the information that's out there, but you've disseminated some information here which is good for the general populace.
And if council would like more information, then just please contact our office and we'll send you some links and some more information if that's what you guys would like.
Certainly, thank you very much.
Okay.
Are you also going to do a presentation at the District of Port Edward?
We on July 2nd we met with um, Mayor McDonald and Councillor Franzen,
Right.
and then with members of the Northwest Fish and Wildlife Conservation Association on July 2nd. So we went to Port Ed and had a similar roundtable conversation.
And you all parted as friends.
Oh yeah,
Good.
we're all eventually at some levels we're all allies when you get to the grassroots of it.
Certainly. I don't think anybody disagrees that the resource comes first and is treasured and is of value locally.
So I'd also provided brought some information around advisory processes, and I don't know if
Right?
that you'd like to continue with that, or if we're and mindful of your time and everything.
No, please go ahead.
Okay. So just the last piece of information that came up from the Northwest Fish and Wildlife Conservation Association had been around angling advisory processes. So it's consultation and
Right.
engagement with our stakeholders. And since 2006 in the Skeena region, we've had an angling advisory process in place. The nomenclature we use is the Skeena Fisheries Advisory Committee, which shouldn't be confused with the DFO analog, which is the Sport Fish Advisory Board or something to that effect. So they're different. And in our process, the SFAC provides advice to the ministry on angling regulations, and members of that committee can propose new regulations for the consideration of the government. The committee structure um, and size has varied over the time period of 8 years now, 9 years, going on 9 years. But generally, the representation comes from angling interests across the region. It has included over the time reps from stakeholder groups such as rod and gun clubs, broadly distributed across the region. First Nations governments have attended in some form and in some meetings. Angling guide industry and angling guides have been represented, as have just unaffiliated anglers. They just come out and want to hear what we have to say and perhaps chew our ears off a little bit on issues. But it's a stakeholder committee. It's for them to give input to government and advice to government, and really, but the key being it's advice to government. Um, and the ministry is open to, we're open to continually improve that process. We've heard some criticisms out there from some folks that it's biased and all sorts of things, but it really is the only vehicle we have to engage our um, angling interests and the anglers themselves. They tend to be not well organized per se. Um, and through that process, we share information. They provide information to us, and it's a healthy, mostly respectful engagement by um, folks who are very emotionally attached to the resource. So we look at it in a very we see the value in it as being an efficient process, and it provides a single forum to get all the diverse interests in the room to have conversations. So that's where we're at. And for those that, in case those interests are too diverse, we're committed for those folks who don't want to participate or seem like it's unfair. We continue to provide all the same information to them, and we'll engage with them on a one-to-one basis so that we get the benefit and they get the benefit of an interaction with us as Fish
Good.
and Wildlife
I
folks.
think that was a concern in the past, so it's appreciated you doing that.
Yeah.
Councillor Ashley.
So just a question about that, and I apologize because I just don't know this. I haven't got a fishing license for years because I haven't had chance to go fishing. But I'm wondering, like in terms of engaging stakeholders and the people that are angling, is there information like say when a person gets a fishing license that says if you have concerns or want more information or those sorts of things where they can go on the actual fishing license? I'm just thinking about. I imagine it would be in the booklet that you get that says where you can fish, but I'm just wondering if it was in something like that.
Yeah, in the freshwater fishing regulation synopsis, there's contact information for all the different regional offices, and that leads anglers to us.
And we do have, and I will apologize right now for it. Um, uh, the Fish and Wildlife Ministry of Forest Lands Natural Resource Operations website has a bunch of information, but in our amalgamation, which when we reorganized and restructured, it all got put together in one place. That was Ministry of Forest had theirs, Ministry of Environment had theirs, and they all got blended together into a very information heavy site, but not very well organized, and it's one of our challenges to restructure that so it is better for anglers and citizens.
Thank you very much.
Okay, that's all I have.
Okay, have a good evening. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Next is a report from the Chief Financial Officer, concerns the July 2014 monthly finance report. Comes with a recommendation that council receives this report for information purposes. Mrs. Bombin, would you please outline your report?
Thank you, Your Worship. For July 2014, compared to 2013, the airport ferry revenue increased by $107,000. Compared to the same period in 2013, total recreation revenue is up $34,000. Watson Island revenue dropped approximately $571,000 because of the expiry of the Watco exclusivity agreement in February 2014. Other noted items for July is that the city has received the Prince Rupert Port Authority's 2014 payment in lieu of tax payment. The city's share of the amount we notified the port to pay based on the applicable mill rates and their assessment based on BC assessment was $1.675 million. This amount was approved in the 2014 budget. The amount the port has paid is $1.152 million. That's the city's share. Consequently, this is $523,000 short from what was budgeted. Had the port not made another interim payment in relation to prior years, while we continued to attempt to resolve our dispute regarding land values, the city would be projecting a deficit after this short payment. Currently, we are not projecting a deficit. As far as expenditures go, most departments are within budget for this time of year. The aggregate utility operating revenues and expenditures are expected to be close to budget. And finally, planned capital projects scheduled to take place in summer 2014 are well underway and nearing completion during the construction season. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Garon.
No questions, just a comment. I just wanted to commend staff on the Civic Center increase in usage and fees. So it's really great that all the staff that's worked really hard down there has brought those revenues up, and we hope to see them up some more. Thanks.
Councillor Garon, would you like to make the move the recommendation, please?
I move that we receive this report.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Kinney. Any further discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion passes. Next is again a report from the Chief Financial Officer, and this concerns the updated city's purchasing policy. It comes with a recommendation that council adopt the new purchasing policy as presented. Mrs. Bombin, would you please outline your proposed policy?
Thank you. The city's existing purchasing policy was created in July 2003, updated July 2004, and most recently updated in May of 2005. It has been 9 years since the last update. Staff is attempting to update all policies citywide to make them relevant and improve the efficiency of city operations. This purchasing policy is one of the first ones to be updated. A city purchasing policy outlines the objectives and procedures with respect to the procurement of goods and services. It identifies the limits of purchasing authority, the process for vendor selection, and outlines procurement thresholds to reflect the city's commitment to and effective stewardship of city financial resources. A municipal purchasing policy is created to ensure that taxpayers obtain good value for money. The most recent iteration of the city's policy is outdated mainly from the point of view of approval thresholds that are now too low, and sole source purchasing where competitive procurement options are limited due to expertise, regional limitations, emergencies, etc., both of which result in unnecessary delays in purchasing. Supplies have increased in cost over the past decade and are now over the threshold requiring 3 quotes. The new policy permits a more relevant threshold before the quote process is required. It also makes it clear when a competitive procurement process is to be undertaken and when sole source purchases are permitted.
It also identifies where purchase orders are not required and outlines sustainable procurement practices. The previous policy was either silent or limited in its direction. To be clear, goods and services must be approved in the budget, and where not within the approved budget amount are submitted to Council for approval. The overall result of the new purchasing policy is to bring the city in line with current purchasing practices in the industry and provide clarification to staff to ensure that all purchases and procurement processes are performed at a high level of integrity and are open, transparent, and fair to all involved. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you. Councillor Ashley.
I'll move the recommendation that we adopt this new purchasing policy.
It's moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Kinney. Would you like to talk about the local procurement, please? Just expand on that. That would be of interest to people locally.
Essentially, the prior policy, sorry, I do have a note here. The prior policy had local preference where appropriate, whereas now this purchasing policy emphasizes best value for money, including local providers. Of course, with sole sourcing, a lot of sole sourcing sometimes has to be done in emergency situations, which automatically makes the local provider one of the front runners because of timing, ability to necessitate the required products, that sort of thing. So it still identifies that local is the preferred, but it doesn't make it the only emphasis.
Okay, thank you very much. There's Councillor Cunningham.
Question on purchases less than $5,000. It says by selecting the best valued supplier using any reasonable procurement process at the purchaser's discretion. Can you expand on that?
That would mean to include verbal quotes. If we were to call up and just say, what is the price for this? We call up another supplier, what is the price? Another supplier. And this just allows them to actually receive a verbal quote over the phone, be able to write it down and who they spoke to.
So there is a record that they've actually got 3 verbal quotes. They're just not going to where their friend works or something, buying whatever they want.
Absolutely. We don't encourage that kind of behavior.
Councillor Garon.
Thank you again to staff for reviewing policies and trying to make matters more efficient for the city. So I think it's great that we're reviewing this.
Call for the question.
I just want to thank the staff for providing the old policy and the new policy. I think the new policy is better than the old policy, and I just want to thank them for doing that. Much easier when we have them both to read them side by side.
Thank you. Certainly the comparison helps. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That motion passes. We'll move on to correspondence for action. There's a request from the Prince Rupert FASD Ad Hoc Committee to proclaim September 9th, 2014 as International Fetal Alcohol Syndrome Disorder Awareness Day. The recommendation is that Council declares September 9th, 2014 as International FASD Awareness Day in the city of Prince Rupert. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Ashley. Is there any discussion? Question's been called. Those in favor? It's good to proclaim that. It helps to have some awareness. This is a long-standing problem for some lifestyles. Next for Council's consideration are resolutions from the closed meetings. Tonight there's one, and this concerns the removal and dismantling of the former pulp mill site, which would be done through an RFP, a request for proposal award. It was moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Garon, that Mayor and Council authorize for release at a regular meeting of Council the contract award to Stantec Engineering for the removal and dismantling of the former mill site on Watson Island. So in speaking to this, the council, through a recommendation from staff, has approved the city awarding a contract to Stantec Engineering in their consideration of the takedown of the old pulp mill at the Watson Island site. This is a particularly challenging job because when the pulp mill was shut down in 2001, the mill was never decommissioned. It was shut down with the intention that it would be up and running within 30 to 45 days, and of course, that never happened. So it's necessitated getting a company, an engineering firm, who is specialized in this work and has some awareness of the site and the facilities there to start the dismantling. So, of course, the end result will be that we move ahead in this community with the redevelopment of Watson Island. It's anticipated that Stantec Engineering, well, there's a lot of background work to be done, would actually start the dismantling sometime next year. And of course, we have an agreement with the former company who, by a twist of legislation, is the owner of the equipment inside the buildings while the city is the owner of the buildings and the land. We'll move on to bylaws and development permits. Councillor Duran.
Could staff clarify where the money is coming from for this
Removal?
contract? Yeah.
Certainly. There is a joint agreement there. Mr. Long, if you would, please.
Yeah, there was money in trust from Sunwave Forest Products, and that is being used for this particular purpose.
Thank you. Under bylaws and development permits, there's a report from the Chief Financial Officer. It's regarding an amendment to the 2013 to 2015 permissive property tax exemption bylaw, which is number 3326, 20112. The recommendation is that council introduce and give first, second, and third reading to the 2013 to 2015 permissive property tax exemption amendment bylaw of the number 3353, 2014. I'll ask council's consideration of this bylaw. Councillor Ashley.
Well, I would move it. I just have one question first, though.
Certainly.
I'm wondering, is that supposed to be 2013 to 2015, or is it supposed to be 2014 to 2015?
The original bylaw was for a period of 3 years, covering 2013 through 2015.
Okay, so I will move the recommendation.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Garon. Is there any discussion? Councillor Cunningham? Please use your microphone.
One question on page 44, number 26, it says that 4.46% of the total assessed value owned by Ocean Center Mall is an exemption because of the alternate schools there, but I see that the alternate school pays to lease that property. I know we exempt schools normally, but this is sort of a different situation.
Yes, it is a different situation. It's unique because of the setup of the building and the use of the premises. Mrs. Bombin, if you'd like to give the background to that, please.
Well, normally if the alternate school would have been in the old location, right, it would have been owned by the school district and they wouldn't have been paying taxes. In this situation, they no longer occupy that old building, and so they've rented out some space from the Ocean Center. So instead of maintaining their own building, now they're just paying someone else for the use of their space. But it's up to the council to determine whether or not they're going to approve a permissive tax exemption on this particular this section of the Ocean Center Mall. And at the time, council did approve it for the 2013 through 2015 years for bylaw.
They did that previously some years ago also for a daycare that was situated there.
Okay, it just seems strange. You've got a business that's making money off something and they're getting a tax exemption on top of it. It just didn't, but that's fine.
Okay, thank you. So the question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. That's adopted. That's not the adoption of the bylaw, but it's the introduction for second and third reading that has been adopted.
Your worship, just on that last point, it's not is it the Ocean Center Mall that or for the school that is given the exemption?
Mrs. Bombin?
Just one moment, Joy. I'm just finding the page again.
Thank you.
It's the Ocean Center Mall is given the exemption, but typically in a leasing arrangement, they actually pass the property tax costs off to the lessee. And so since the lessee is the school district, although the Ocean Center Mall isn't paying that portion of the tax, they're also in turn not collecting that portion of the tax from the school district.
Good. That's what I thought. I didn't. Yeah. Yes. Thank you very much.
So the benefit is going to the user. Okay, we'll move on to reports, questions, and inquiries from members of council. Councillor Kinney.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Long. Mr. Long, as you've seen in the paper, that there's a $2 increase for City West now coming up, and they're going to have to be paying it online, etc. A lot of our seniors don't have computers. They don't know how to use them or pay online. And furthermore, $2 to them is life or death for a phone call.
Mr. Long, if you would please talk to the board of directors and the management at City West, and please tell them that, as Councillor Kinney has stated, we've got seniors and others on fixed income here, and none of them as subscribers made a decision to have City West use computers and then place them at a disadvantage where it would cost them additional money per month because they want a paper statement. It's also been noted that in some other of the communications companies across Canada that they're now withdrawing the charge. So ask the board of directors and the staff there to consider that, please. Councillor Cunningham.
I spoke with City West a week ago about this after Mr. Kinney brought it up, and they now have a list that they are taking of people that do not have internet service, and they are exempting them from it. So anyone that they've already been proactive with this, and I believe I mentioned it to Mr. Kinney already, Mr. Forgotten, that they have a list there. If you go in and say you do not have internet, they will send you a paper bill. So it's just a matter of going down there. And in most cases, these people are paying their bills downtown anyway. So it's just a matter of them going up to the girls and telling them, look, I don't have internet. And they're taking a list of all the people that do not have internet service and exempting them from it.
Well, I appreciate that information and you doing that. However, I think it's totally unfair that the onus is put on the subscriber. I'd prefer, as we are the representatives of the shareholders of that corporation, that our city manager goes back to the board of directors, goes back to the staff there. The onus shouldn't be on the subscriber. I think it's totally unfair. But I appreciate what you're saying. I just don't think the onus should be on them. Councillor Garon.
I do a lot of stuff online, and people are saying that it's green if you don't get stuff mailed to you in the mail, but I print out my bills, so it's not any greener, which is a point I'm putting across. And also, most companies will ask you if you want to have your bill mailed to you or if you want it emailed. So I don't know why City West is imposing this on everybody. They should be following what the standard is in the industry, which people are asked if you want an emailed copy. But just a little word out there about it's not any greener, because most people print their bills out. And sometimes your printer doesn't work. You end up printing it out 3 times and you've got 3 times the amount of paper.
You're correct. All it's done is shift the onus. It shifted the onus on the user. Thank you, Mr. Long. Councillor Ashley.
So I just wanted to see if we could arrange. We've got UBCM coming up. Some of us are going, some of us aren't able to. But I still would like to have a chance for us to have a kind of informal workshop together as council to just go over the things that we'd be meeting with ministers about and just make sure that everybody is kind of on the same page. So I'm not sure what dates would work, but I thought it'd be better to kind of throw it out there now and see if we could find something that would maybe work for everybody.
How about a week from now, Monday night?
That would work for me. I don't know how it works for everybody else. And whether staff, if staff have stuff ready like that, we would.
Use your mic, please, for Councillor Thorkelson.
We'll get back to you with what works and when we've got it all together.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
Could we, that means all council, even the people that aren't going, simply so that everyone can get their ideas, because some of the people that aren't going have good ideas too.
It's inclusionary for everyone. Councillor Garon.
I had a couple people ask me this week about speed limits down in the Cow Bay area, and also about some pedestrian signs missing. There's a crosswalk that goes, I think, from Dolly's across to the parking lot. Apparently, there was a pedestrian sign there quite a long time ago, and it's been ripped off or missing. So someone was wanting to have that reinstated, and just complaints about traffic just whizzing down around the corner
So
there.
well, there's been an increase in the flow of traffic there, of course, while the Hayes Creek Bridge was closed, but
So I'm just passing that on to staff.
certainly. Councillor Cunningham.
The 6th Street Bridge, now that it's open, I noticed it's.
Do you like the rumble strips there?
Yeah. Is that going to be repaved or what's the deal?
Yes, it will be. Yeah.
We are waiting for Adventure Paving to actually pave it for us. We've been requesting them repeatedly to get it done. But
Thank
they
you.
have other priorities, it seems.
Councillor Garon.
And speaking of priorities, I haven't gotten an update from the airport. Do you know how the paving's going today or yesterday? Anybody have a report?
I believe the runway's been completed.
Okay.
They're now working on the
On the
aprons
road?
and the
Okay.
approaches.
So
Yes.
we're waiting for the asphalt plant to come back over from the airport because that's where it is right now.
Sole supplier. Councillor Ashley, anything further? Councillor Thorkelson, have you got anything this evening?
No, Your Worship. Thank you very much.
Okay. I'll give the mayor's report. I attended the Prince Rupert Airport Authority Board of Directors meeting for the month of August 2014. At that, the $10 million runway rehabilitation was approximately 2/3 complete. It's supposed to be complete, that's just specifically the runway, by the end of August. Also, the $7 million airport terminal redevelopment and expansion is about to commence. I also attended the Prince Rupert Friendship House block party on Friday, August 22nd, 2014, and provided a greeting on behalf of City Council. Mr. Long, I'm hoping that you could have a staff member make an inquiry to the City of Prince George. I see that downtown Prince George was able to procure an increase for funding, and this is to enhance facade improvements, branded signage, and public art, and they were able to obtain $250,000 to do that. And if there's an opportunity for placemaking enhancement initiatives, it may be an appropriate consideration here. If you'd find out, please. Councillor Garon.
I just have one more comment or question or concern from people stopping at the light on McBride and 3rd. There's various times again where you have to sit there for a good 3 minutes waiting for that light to change when you're heading down from 3rd, to cross 3rd east to 3rd west, whatever. So
So there's an exaggerated delay with the light?
Oh yeah, sometimes you're sitting there thinking the light's broken and then you end up running the red light because you think it's never going to change and there's no traffic coming. So you're sitting there waiting, and then you think you've missed it because you've been waiting so long. So I think it needs to be fixed.
Okay, thank you. That'd be Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure. If there's nothing further, I'll ask council for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Ashley, seconded by Councillor Cunningham, that this meeting stand adjourned. We've already got a motion to do that. Question's been called. Those in favor? Thank you. This council meeting stands adjourned.